What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 6 of the Grouse House podcast. You're back in action. You were under the weather a little bit from a Vegas bender, or as you say, summer league, but I don't know. How was it?
Both.
Wait, both. Okay, both. Yeah, there's only one way to do it, in and out. We're going to get into summer league in a second, but dude, the free agency has been in an absolute frenzy. You want to kick us off with some free agency news, NBA?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, free agency as of recording here, I think we're probably most of the dust is certainly settled here. But NBA teams handed out contracts to 73 players in the first 24 hours at about $2.8 billion. We saw a lot of players obviously stay with their home teams. I think we had gotten accustomed. I recall a couple of years ago, you and I were in Vegas. We just experienced the Zion earthquake game. We got back to the hotel room and boom, the Paul George, Kawhi Leonard transaction to the Clippers happened. A lot of excitement. I feel like this was this kind of free agency was the exact opposite of that. Of course, noting the NBA had bumped up the salary cap to 136 with a tax level 165, although there are some of these aprons. This new CBA has some restrictions to prevent building these super teams, with the first apron level at 172 and the second one at 183. And then the other thing I think super interesting is that the floor is also maintained at 90% of the salary cap. There's really not a lot of gaps that you might see in something like the MLB. The NBA is really pretty tight on the spend, at least with the intention of the new CBA. But there really weren't a lot of big moving pieces. Obviously, there was like that one day of Kyrie to the Suns, which I think was totally fake. But any free agency signings, just out of curiosity, that you loved? Or we talked a little bit about the last thing, but like in terms of the business side of it?
No, actually, you said this at the top of the question, which was it was a little bit quiet, not that many big moves and shakeups. Even some of the bigger names moving around were as a result of trades and not really signings. So kind of a weird free agency year, not too typical of what we've seen in the past. Sure, there's a few that stand out. We mentioned last episode, but I was expecting to see these things with the new CBA. I'd be really interested to see how it affects free agency next year. One question I have for you is this new unofficial start date that's now 5 days before you can ink the paper. If I'm not mistaken, it's July 1st. You can start the negotiations and the communication, but maybe can't ink until July 5th. Pre-agency, I think, is what they're calling it. What do you make of that? And how do you think that could affect free agencies in the future?
Yeah. Before I touch on one gripe is I think we need to just move on and stop talking about dollar amounts and start talking about all these contracts in percentage bases. I'm so tired of hearing, oh, such and such athlete, I can't believe they make $30 million a year. And then you hear some reference, Michael Jordan only made 12. And it's just like, guys, there's inflation. There's like a percentage of salary cap. Michael is getting paid like half of the. I get so annoyed now with these headlines of he's $100 million man. I'm just like, tell me as a percentage now moving forward. I don't want to think anymore on these dollar amounts. It's just the numbers keep getting bigger. The league keeps getting bigger.
That's not how headlines work, though. But
no, I know.
Yeah.
I look forward to the day that we can say like Dylan Brooks signed for 40% of the team's salary cap. That go freak out.
Well,
there's what I want to hear.
That's on the tabloids and not actual news, because that will never happen.
So this unofficial and official start date, I think this is what the NBA generally, and Adam Silver as a commissioner, just continues to get right, is this movement towards this happens anyway. So let's create a structure that just embraces reality instead of trying to fight and conform. And no one's talking about free agent. Like now, the joke, of course, is like plenty of this stuff is happening even before that date. And I think there's these weird things like Chris Middleton, as an example. I'm a Bucks fan. He was under contract. He opts out. And then he signs a new deal. From a rule compliance perspective, does that mean they can talk at length about signing a contract extension, or what if he were a free agent? And then he's like, okay, handshake on the agreement. He opts out. Now he's a free agent. You don't talk to him. And then 12 hours later, you talk to him again and he signs a piece of paperwork and you move on. So anyways, I like this movement towards that. And the second thing I'd like to see more is I'd like to see a little more chaos in this time period. And I don't know how you do that a little bit, but I would love for teams to be like, hey, I'm verbally announcing I'm signing with the Milwaukee Bucks because I'm going to go. And then a rival team, let's say the Chicago Bulls, is like, let's go beat that offer. We have 5 days to go beat that offer. And to see people break their word more, I think would be really chaotic and fun as a fan. Obviously be hellacious for the GMs and obviously some of the agents and some of the players. But I remember like those feelings in these times of saying, I wish these were all a little less baked. And I wish this time period was that time to announce and allow the feeding frenzy to happen. But I think there's just too much on the line these days for that chaos to happen. But that's my take
I
on
don't
it.
know, actually. I think GMs would absolutely hate it for sure, probably front office more broadly. But I think it would be a win for the NBA.
Oh,
It
yeah.
reminds me of the NCAA recruitment process. I think the real engagement for NCAA is like a month before signing day because you have all these things. You have the players that are being recruited, you have their top three, scout rivals. They do their crystal ball, which is where they think they're going. And then you get the verbal, right? And then it's not until, and now it's this full almost LeBron taking my talents to South Beach type press conference where they have the hats laid out and you put on the hat, which college you're picking. And there's a lot of excitement for college athletics around that time that is not directly involved in the season. So if the NBA had their mischievous hat on, right, I could see them doing that and making this 5 day of like, where are these guys going to sign? Completely open book. Who's like air quote recruiting them? Who are they talking to? Which one are they going to pick? I don't think it could ever happen because of the mechanics of free agency and all these intimate conversations that are happening. But man, that would be so cool if everyone was glued to ESPN for those 5 days trying to figure out where exactly the next player was going to go.
Yeah. And we get it through the media. The media does this regardless of the rules. And so I do think, to your point, the NBA has to be the structure that kind of gets all this done. But I don't know. I really enjoy the general concept and find it to be fun. Next question on this is this new CBA. There was a lot of talk about no teams going over the second apron. There were a couple teams that did, but it certainly did feel like it was the beginning of the end of the Big Three era. Do you feel like this super team, Big Three, the players choosing where they go, starts to look different?
I don't know. I think it's always going to be tough to say. I think there's a few macro trends that make this question really difficult. 20 years ago, did people really care whether they played in a massive market? I think there's always some benefits to it. I think you always wanted to be in LA or New York. But now with the rise of just these athletes as brands, it's almost like they'll do anything to get to those cities. So I think there's always going to be these major market teams that are going to attract talent. They'll have money to spend. Players will want to go there. And could you see them kind of form a trio, perhaps even player taking a slight pay cut to join a Miami Heat, Knicks, Nets, Lakers, places like that, Bulls, potentially. I think we've already seen a shift before this latest CBA. I think like the era of dynamic duos. I think that is probably more likely. It's hard to say whether I think the NBA actually benefits from either one. I'm sure there's pros and cons to both as far as their bottom line goes, or whether it's a big three era versus a bunch of teams with a couple blue chip blockbuster type of talent. But I've already seen the shift heading before that. But you're right. These new salary cap restrictions with the aprons make that a lot more difficult to strategically from a front office to put those type of teams together, the super teams, if you will.
Yeah, I do miss. Obviously, it's part of my age, but that I like your dynamic duo era is an interesting tag. But my jump to my mind was like the NBA Jam era, where it was like it felt like
Mm-hmm.
every team had this dynamic duo that you could play NBA Jam with, which made every team interesting and watchable. Maybe not the Washington Bullets though in NBA Jam. That was a tough pairing. Was it Scott Skiles and you had Weber one year? I think one of the
We had
NBA Jam
Weber.
editions,
No,
but I
Scott
think the
Skiles
other
was still
and Rex Chapman probably.
Scott Skiles was still the Magic in NBA Jam.
I think
Yeah.
maybe it's tournament edition, the NBA Jam TE.
NBA Jam had three players, right? So on the court you played two,
Oh,
but
right.
there was three that were selectable. So I think you had the Shaq Penny for NBA Jam, but I think Scott Skiles was the third in that rotation.
Okay, I do see it says there's two. The arcade version had a 1992-93 version, which I think would be the
Mhm.
Scott Skiles in Orlando one, or would that be the Washington version? And then the consoles used 93-94, and then there were some ports that had a little bit. That seems to be the two roster eras, and so it sounds like Scott Skiles was a wizard and a. Oh, here we go. Here's the Bucks were brutal back then too, man. Vin Baker, maybe Blue Edwards, Eric Murdoch, maybe. That was a tough roster then. Washington Bullets says, oh, Tom Gugliotta and Harvey Grant,
Wow.
Calbert Cheney. Yeah. Okay. So your three it sounds like the first version was Tom Gugliotta, Harvey Grant, and no, that was the console version. So that was the later version. Rough.
Rough. Yep.
Sorry to derail us there. Let's move to Summer League. I was super bummed, by the way, that you didn't get to attend. I know that you had personal matters to attend to, but
Mhm.
it didn't hit the same without Flex Chapman there.
I know I'm always bummed to miss summer league. We had a nice streak going, but it sounds like you had a good time. We've talked about this at length in the previous season of this podcast, but I love NBA summer league. I think personally, because I'm also a college basketball fan, it's like the rosters too, right? You got obviously the star-studded rookies, got a few second-year players, but then you have that random point guard from Marquette that you just watch just give everyone buckets. Probably not going to make NBA roster, but man, it's just always cool to see. Then you get a couple vets, right? I remember we saw Beasley last
Beasley,
year.
Jabari Parker was supposed to play this year on the Bucks, and I was super hyped. He dropped out last minute, but yeah, you get those random.
It's just like the rosters are great. Also, the flow of games, right? So you have it in Thomas and Mack, you have it on their main court, then you have it in the auxiliary gym. And going back and forth and checking out different games, and you could stay there for one game, you could stay there all day. I think the whole energy behind Summer League is just phenomenal. So 55,000 people attended opening weekend last year. We don't quite have the data for this year, but
It felt busier.
yeah, up 40% from 2021, which is crazy. And they're calling it the new marketing engine. I think Cuban summarized it as its primary value as a whole is to be a marketing platform for the NBA. There's 2K tournaments. There's the exhibition hall, NBA Con, I think, which we're going to get into in a second. Super cool. And obviously, the viral, very memeable event was the Sphere. I think we saw it in construction, if I'm not mistaken, last year. And then this year, they had it lit up with the NBA basketball and the Summer League.
It was really cool.
Yeah, so they just like the NBA knows exactly what they're doing with this. And I feel like they're investing more time, effort, energy into it. It's no mistake that it's in Vegas, right? Like just a very cool atmosphere to be in. And it's kind of this in between state. Like you have this build up for the draft happens, and then we're just supposed to hang until October. So they're like, no, why don't we have this summer league? We'll air it on TV. I remember back in college, it was like NBA TV, middle of the day. They were playing in a gym in Orlando, and to see what it is today, you could tell they're putting a lot of money into it. Saying that, it's like other leagues, the spring training, if you will, I think is probably the closest parallel, is like non-existent. I don't even know if any broadcast will even pick it up. Even all-star games in most of the leagues are struggling. And meanwhile, the NBA Summer League is just on fire. Like, why do you think that is? Why is it the seasonality of it? Is it because it's summer in Vegas? Is it because NBA's young talent is like always very attractive to your everyday sports fan? Like, why do you think NBA is doing so well? And then part two of that question is, why do you think that NBA is like kind of prioritizing it?
Yeah, I think the magic you touched on, and it was funny, like you and I will just put a little bit of money on random games and we go with a third friend who will remain nameless. And like I went with him and it just felt like I was just looking at this list of just, I don't know, I pulled up the rosters and I was like, I don't know who to bet on. Like, and I feel like when the three of us normally go, you're like, oh yeah, that's this person, that person, and the third friend is, yeah, but dude, this has that defense, and you guys are then start talking about these sort of fantasy teams, and I'm like, oh, I don't know much about college basketball, and I get excited, and then I'm like, dude, we got to go see that, and I felt very much like a normie, which I am, going and watching these rosters that I really had no idea who anyone was, and so I love that dynamicness to learn through you guys of who all these elite collegiate players are to watch that. So I think to your point, I've often told friends and family, it's like a college all-star game sprinkled in with these NBA like once in a lifetime opportunity to go see these guys really up close in a really affordable space. Traditionally, it's $35 to buy a ticket to watch the entire day of basketball. And then on those first opening days, I think it's 8 games total or something like that, maybe 6. So it's an insanely amazing value. Hotels in the summer in Vegas are often pretty cheap, especially a little bit off the strip, more towards the arena. So I think like one of the things that was so special about Summer League was its intimacy. I think I've told this story in the podcast before, but we went in the auxiliary gym. I had to go to the bathroom right before tip off. I'm at the urinal. I look to my right and it's one of the Hawks players, like in his jersey, going to the bathroom real quick, wash his hands, bop back on the court. It's just like, wait, what? Like that intimacy of the game and the fans, and a lot of the GMs are walking around and there's famous players and what. It's just a really cool, intimate, and it's in the past been a chill space. And then, of course, to the actual product, it's basically a college level all-star game. So it's really good to watch. It's certainly, there's some turnovers more that you might not expect from the NBA guys, but It's just a fantastic experience. But I will say that this year and last year, I'm starting to get a little bit like losing some of the sheen. And maybe it's the hipster in me. But I remember last year we went and we were going to go to the Thunder game and see Chet play. And it was like, oh, Chet played in Utah 3 days ago and he's done for the summer. And it was just like, wait, what? And then Wemby was going to play in Sacramento, I think, in the Cal Classic or whatever. And like Keegan Murray, as you and I were texting about, Keegan drops 40 a game in the Cal thing. He doesn't come to Vegas and play. I'm starting to get like a little frustrated, honestly, to be like, okay, Vegas is great and it's awesome. And certainly where all the teams are. But some of that magic is starting to be really squeezed into like the things like NBA Con and like really turning this into a marketing platform. And these top players are now playing one, maybe 2 games, and then they're dipping out. And then the rest of the games, they're good to watch and they're interesting, but they're really different, obviously, than Wemby getting his reps in or Zion getting his reps in or Chet. And the dynamic changes on it. And so I've actually been wondering, I'm like, now, I know this will be sacrilegious to us and we probably won't actually do this, but it's like, dare we go to Sacramento? Dare we go to Salt Lake City to watch the pre-Summer League Summer Leagues to get back that feeling of being really back intimate and close experiences with that? Probably not. But it's not as crazy as idea as it felt a few years ago, where Summer League was like this beautiful little gem. So as a fan who goes, you can tell it's become like a real thing. It's scaled. It's important. It's much more expensive these days. It's NBA Con. They're promoting the NBA Con. They want you to go to it. Like, it's become a whole thing. But as we've always gone back to in the NBA, the product on the court is excellent to watch. They are getting the important players out there. They are often, it's debut of Wemby in a Spurs uniform playing. There's something still special, and they're monetizing the shit out of it, as they should. So a lot of
Yeah.
conflicting things. I don't think I really answered your question, but lots of thoughts.
Yeah, it's good, like kind of anecdotal evidence for, I think, why Summer League is what it is. One thing I was thinking through as we were going through the show notes is that I think one advantage I think NBA has that's really interesting is, for lack of a better term, I'm calling it, is like consolidation advantage, right? Which you look at the top, keep it on the sports level, the actual sport. Soccer is a global game, but it's also very distributed. Like the EPL is a great league. La Liga is a great league. The series in Italy, a fantastic league, right? Where so it's like you have this like global talent base, but also distributed leagues all over the world that are at those top category and the most prestigious leagues. American football, for example, right, is a local league, right? Mostly absolutely dominated by US sports, but also a local sport. All the talent is born and bred here in the US. Basketball is a global talent base with a local league. EuroLeague is great, but it's nowhere near the NBA. And I think what that does is that gives them the advantage of have these hype cycles. Okay, you have someone like Wemby who's from France. Come on out to Vegas and see him. Make a trip to the US or watch the games. That is such a strong advantage when it comes to, I don't want to say those leagues are competing. Of course, they're competing with ratings, but they're also competing with everything else outside of sports for eyeballs. But from a sports perspective, I think that's a really interesting kind of differentiator and competitive advantage when you look at it like that. And so why not take the time when people are taking vacations? You go to a place that mostly people want to go to, depending on who you ask. But if you visit the US, Vegas is a popular destination. I got to go check this thing out. Why not coordinate it around the Summer League, which I think is interesting. Which kind of leads into the next question. They're doing these things around, like we mentioned, a 2K tournament. They're lighting up the sphere with a basketball for Summer League. Like, then they debuted NBA Con. I don't know if you got a chance to check it out, but what did you hear about it? And if you got to experience it, what was it like?
It was interesting because I felt like a lot of the signs and the like media and the website and all that were really pushing this NBA Con idea. But then when I was there, it didn't really feel like, I was like, where is it? Like, how do I get to it? Like it felt missing. And I do think that this venue they have right now might be the wrong venue to tack something on like this. Now, maybe NBA Con, and I actually should probably just Google where it was actually located, but it felt like it should be the kind of sauce in between walking around the space. And you obviously know that area really well. They have the practice facility right there. We're on UNLV's campus, but like the idea of going, it looks like it's at the Mandalay Bay South Convention Center. That just feels like the wrong location to me. I feel like you should come to the game, and there is an amazing carnival right here. and NBA cons going on, you should want to be in that space too. You don't have to be. That experience, that pull, I feel like was really lacking. And maybe their strategy was to be a lot of the media stuff that they could rebroadcast. So maybe the local experience wasn't as much of a priority, but it definitely felt pretty tacked on. And of course, I love the NBA's experimentation. This was the debut of it. So I'm sure they'll get an assessment of whether they liked it and what they want to do and change and all that. But it definitely felt as like an add-on that could have been part of, I'm imagining that area of that campus converted into an air conditioning sort of NBA con space that like I probably would have participated in that world. So there could be a change of venue coming up. I've heard zero chatter of that, but just having experience in that world and knowing that they're interested in thinking about Vegas more, it certainly feels like an opportunity to upgrade their facilities.
I think it's going to be tough because of the two gyms there. That's such a luxury, especially as a fan paying. It's like hopping back and forth is
amazing.
Just amazing, like accessibility thing to be able to do. So I agree though. I feel like for it to be a marketing platform, you said Carnival, right? I feel like, yeah, bring people in. If I'm doing a North Star, right? If I'm leading strategy, I'm doing a few different things, right? It's got to be, the term immersive is coming to mind. Like I should want to stay there all day. We should want to go at noon and leave at midnight because there's so much stuff going on. We could catch games, we can eat, we can do different experiences, all like the fan engagement thing that they have ideas. Like that should be the North Star. Another thing too, you mentioned this. I don't know who's structuring these things. It might be for a good reason, so I don't want to bash them just because. But hey, why not make the first game? It's Summer League. Why not make the first game Wemby versus Chet? Like you should structure these things so you have the best players playing first and they're battling. Then what I would do is after you match those rookies, like I think they did this with Jabari Smith and Paulo last year. I think that was the first game. That whole week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday should all be only those matchups. And we get it. Let them play one or two games, but just make sure that the one or two games they do play,
Right.
all eyes are on them. Then what I would do is everything after that, whether that's weekend 2, I would hype up the rule change experiment. I would say, hey, week 2, Bucks versus Oklahoma City Thunder, we're doing element ending games. We're doing 20-second shot clock. We're doing like maybe pick a game or two to do experiments. Like, hey, by the way, we're doing this. I think that would get more eyeballs. That might make me want to go to weekend 2 if I'm seeing interesting rule changes.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Or those see-through balls like that Wilson announced. Give me something that make it worth it to stay both weekends. Like yes. I would do it. I would do it. If I'm not going to get Victor, what am I going to get? Okay, cool. Like I would be down to see different rule changes and how that affect gameplay. So I think they should invest so much into Summer League. Obviously, maybe we're biased because we've gone and we've had a great experience, but that is an NBA fan's playground. That's basketball recess. Like they should invest more and more into that.
I think there is some tension that we are not discussing, but it's worth bringing up, which is I'm sensing, and part of my comment about us going to Sacramento or Salt Lake City is it's starting to feel like the Sacramento one, and it might not be in Sacramento. They're certainly in Northern California. It's either in the Bay Area or Sacramento. But
if it's Cal, then it's Bay Area.
Okay. I think those two events to me are starting to feel like the more intentional player development ones, and Summer League starting to feel like a little highlight show, mini league, more all-star game type situation. And so what you and I just articulated, there's certainly a tension, right? This opening kind of weekend and opening space. And for what it's worth, the NBA did schedule, it was the Hornets versus the Spurs. So it was Brandon Miller versus Wemby. So a 1 versus 2. And I think Scoot was matched up. I can't remember with who they were matched up with. So there is some effort there. But the more they're investing into making this a thing, the more that they are creating tension with the player development stuff, which you and I as a fan are certainly leaning towards. That's fine, player development elsewhere. But there is, I think, some energy escaping the system. And we saw that again with Chet last year of just not even playing in Summer League. And there were some injury concerns and all that stuff too. I don't want to, but there's starting to potentially be the new Summer League, which is happening before the Summer League. So I am curious on how do you balance this player development effort while also getting the stars some reps, highlighting it and all that stuff. There's a tough tension going on here for the league that I'm not envious of.
I don't know. I feel like the player development thing might just be a card that they're playing. Like, did Victor Wembanyama get a lot of player development in Summer League? You play like the 1.5 games or whatever. Is he developing as a player? As you want to fit the system, they do all that at practice. You want to get kind of game like he played against Ignite, right? Like he's played against the talent ish, right? He played professionally. I guess summer league gonna do that.
Yeah.
I don't know. If I'm the NBA, I'm like, hey, go play wherever you want after weekend one, right? It doesn't matter. But like Keegan, Jabari, Chet, and Miller, Scoot, Wimby, like everyone's in Vegas weekend one.
Yeah, it feels like they need to reschedule everything. It's that Vegas has to be the opening weekend. That in order to play
Exactly.
in a
That's what I'm saying.
NBA jersey that starts in Vegas, and that's when it goes down. Maybe there's incentive structures for them to attend to it or something like that. And then maybe it starts to deteriorate into multiple different events. But there's something going on. And I know Adam Silver was asked about the two other summer leagues, and they were asked about should Wemby make his debut in Vegas or should he play in Utah? Because I think the Spurs were playing in Utah, and he was like, "Look, he can play wherever he wants. He can play wherever the Spurs want him to play. He can make his debut there. He can make it here. He doesn't have to play at all in summer league. He can do whatever he wants." And that's where I think Adam's such a savvy commissioner. It's like, but he should debut in Vegas. Come on,
Right.
Brandon, on the main stage. What are we doing here, guys? This is an entertainment business at the end of the day. And
That's
to
what
your
I'm
point,
saying.
he's not really getting developed. And I think this is the sad reality. This is one of the sad elements of the NBA sort of farm system, for lack of a better word. And we're starting to see some guys punch through, making it from the G League into the NBA, having a meaningful stay. We're seeing a little more of that. But it is a sad reality that I think you and I we were talking some trash about your guy Jabari. And I was like, okay, cool. He cooked a bunch of guys that are never going to actually suit up in an NBA game. And so to your point about a development piece, like the development piece is hyped up as the thing, but like the sad reality of it is 95% of these guys probably not even getting an NBA contract ever in their life, let alone touching the court during real minutes. So how much development is quote unquote going? It's a great showcase for them to highlight them going overseas, which I think is important for the NBA to help facilitate, but it is something a little bit different.
Yeah, just to put this in perspective, Wemby's first game and him playing god awful, like how do you think that changed the perception of the Spurs drafting him first overall? Absolutely none. They knew about him since he was 14. They've trained him, they've worked him out, they've watched film, they've seen him play against professional level talent, and they've projected him having a bad first game in summer league. It doesn't change their perception of their draft pick or him at all. Even if he had a good game, is he developing as a player? That's done. Player development is this very holistic thing, right? It's weight training, it's nutrition, it's film, it's practice, it's conditioning, right? I think they say, oh, we want to develop our players by not going to Vegas and staying at Cal. Like, I'm with you. Adam says, hey guys, first couple games for every single NBA team is in Vegas. And by the way, we're setting the schedule, and it just so happens that the number 1 overall pick, the number 2 overall pick are going to be guarding each other in the main event of the first game. That's what they should be doing.
Yeah. I do got to give you one thing before we move on. The highlight of the trip with my eyeballs was Jabari taking over in the second half and then hitting. Because I texted, so just for context, I texted Flex a shot of the box score because Jabari had a pretty rough first half. He didn't look great. He looked like he was not playing aggressive, which I think are some of his concerns as a player. And second half comes out. I send this photo to Flex, and I think it was the middle, like you weren't around. And then, of course, he comes back and just touches the ball every time, like clearing people out, ISOing people, drilling shots, just scoring in every single which way. He ends up putting up, what was it, like 30, 40, 37, or I don't know, he puts up a big number and then hits a buzzer beater, which was a pretty beautiful. I think they had a half second, 0.6 seconds, I think, on the clock to get that shot up. Flings it up, nails it, runs off the court. Definitely the highlight of my watching experience. So shout out to Jabari.
Shout out to Jabari. Oh my God, I'm going to save that clip forever. Shout out to Jabari. Definitely got to move on after that one. I never thought you'd say that, even though you were dead wrong. Let's move on. So Jay-Z's Rock Nation inks a deal with Italy's Serie A. If you're someone from the States, Serie A, I think if you're trying to be a little bit more cultured. But anyway,
that's a country.
True. I don't know. I'm gonna say Series A, like the good American that I am. But historically regarded as obviously one of the most competitive football leagues in the world. We talked about this earlier. Legendary franchises. You got AC Milan, Inter Milan, Juventus, Napoli. And these two entities have actually worked together before, and I think they're kind of a few-year engagement. So they decided, I think, the new deal is going to be more expansive, with really the goal oriented around bringing more eyeballs to the best Italian football league, one of the best leagues in the world, to North America through experiences, digital content, marketing activation, and events. Rock Nation getting more and more into the world's sport by representing a bunch of European soccer players. I think probably the most high profile one is Lukaku, the Belgian national team player, and currently on Inter Milan, who has played in the Champions League final. So this is interesting. I've been kind of a casual to more a growing soccer football fan over the past couple of years. And there seems to be this growing trend to make the popularity of international football big here in the States. So, what do you think of this crossover? What do you think of the goals? Is Rock Nation the one that can maybe bring more eyeballs to the Italian Soccer League? I don't know. It's two things you wouldn't think would pair nicely, but what are your initial thoughts?
I think the headline reads like it came out of 2001 is what my middle school self would be like. Hova is where like, I think there's Rock Nation's a funny brand to me. I mean, look, they've built out their agency model and all that stuff, but this honestly does read like it's 20 years old. There's a sort of really Rock Nation, like I don't like Jay-Z, like I get it, but I don't know. It just does. I don't think there's the brand equity as strong as it used to be. When I think about this as compared to Messi coming over and this whole Apple deal and like him
Yeah.
playing in the US, traveling the US, in the US time zones, playing in your local-ish market. Even if I lived in Seattle for a while, I went to a couple Seattle games. I think I'm blanking on their name even.
Sounders.
Right. Sounders, thank you. And they had Ryan Dempsey on the squad. And Ryan, like he certainly was a star at that time and certainly pulled in a lot of eyeballs. But like the rest of that roster, I can't really name many of the folks, but to think of like Messi were to come to that and like Messi, Dempsey, Seattle on Sunday, dude, the ticket sales on that would be off the charts. And so when I think about how does Syria, as you said, I'm just going to say the country
Serie.
name, Syria, there we go, we're competing. And look, I think they might as well take a shot. I don't know how else you're going to do it. And Rock Nation, I guess, has like their finger on the pulse. I'm not even sure what that means, but it doesn't hurt to try. But when I think of what the MLS is doing, giving real equity value to a player, cutting in custom deals to Apple TV, doing custom merch deals to get things done, I'm just like, this just feels like an order of magnitude more likely to work here in the US than what this sort of partnership is in them doing it. I just don't think there's enough brand pull with Rock Nation.
So I couldn't agree more. I want to pick that apart a little bit because I don't think it's Jay-Z. I don't think he has the But you're basically with goals like this, you're trying to reach the younger generation. And I don't know if Jay-Z is the guy to do that. Our 18-year-olds listen
Drake?
to Jay-Z.
Sure.
No. Drake, sure. Maybe even someone younger than Drake now. It's like you tap into that like 16
21.
to 20. I don't know. Like that's exactly what you're doing. I don't know.
Roblox. I'd be more hyped about a Roblox deal.
Honestly, when
Yeah,
NASCAR, we
yeah.
talked about that last episode. Like they nailed it. So you're right. I don't love the partnership who like I'll say we as from the United States are bringing to the table in this deal. I think it's the right league. I don't think it's the right partner to go and do that. But I think the meta takeaway, the net positive, right, is that you might see this with a Premier League team. You might see this with La Liga, right? And what I think is then you start checking every box. What I don't like about the taking washed players, and I'm not suggesting that Messi's washed by any means, but he's so much in the twilight of his career, is that's going to be fun for a couple years. But
Yeah.
the EPL, Serie A, and La Liga are like, these are the best leagues in the entire world. These have the guys who are like 19, 20, 21. These are the future of international football. And I think getting more eyeballs on those leagues is also really important to grow it here in the States. So basically, I think it's long overdue that we have a solid football culture here in the US. I think we have enough athletes. I think there's enough eyeballs on the game, enough people play that I think our national team should be way better than we even are. And like just, we don't really play it here. I think it's a lame excuse. And I think we need deals like this to start. I hear digital activations. I hear events. I hear different partnership and brand deals through their distribution here. And I love that. I just don't know if it should be Rock Nation. I look at them as different strategies to grow it here in the US.
Right.
And obviously, I'm all for the Apple deal. We talked about that at length, I think, a few episodes back. I love the attempt, and I hope it works out. But Jay-Z repping Lukaku at courtside at a Knicks game, is that going to make people tune in? I just don't. I don't think so. So we'll see. In general, I like the strategy, but I don't know if it's the right pairing.
My biggest problem, and I think a league that wants to win, and I just fundamentally believe this, has to find better broadcasting times for the US market. And I know that's damn near impossible just given the way the earth is shaped, but I think to me it's just the unfortunate reality. I think being able to get games on that are live so that you can check your phone and not have spoiler alerts that match nighttime-ish in the US. It can be 4 p.m. here, but like it has to, and we talked about this with golf, right? We talked about the TGL versus sort of a classic PGA tournament being on a Thursday at 1 p.m. I think that's just really difficult to build into. That is something you want to turn on 90 minutes live in your morning, especially on a Saturday morning or what. It's just like the time stuff just makes it really difficult, which is why I'm just so much more bullish on this MLS approach of just saying they're already here. The time zones fit. And so if we can just keep bringing a little bit better players, I think that's what tips it.
Yeah, that's complicated. I think the chances that you get later times, like if you get Juventus versus Inter, push that game back to a 10 p.m. start time or something like that. They get very American of us to be like, hey, why don't you guys adjust?
If you
Sounds
want the
hilarious.
market, that's all I'm saying. Is
Yeah,
if you don't want the market, then don't touch a thing. If you want the
right.
market, you got to figure out some compromises. That's all.
Right. I'm in Europe right now, and I'm being self-conscious about my American ways. But yeah, like I think pushing that primetime game back once a week and then just like promoting the hell out of it, right?
Oh yeah,
Like I don't see a problem with that. Don't move every time back, but it's like
got to give them something.
give us something if they want that. I think that approach is more sound than trying to get the talent to come here. I just don't think.
Yeah, that's fair.
Although how appealing it is to live and play in the US is great, but I can't see a bunch of homegrown talent wanting to stay.
It's worth noting we're discussing two perspectives. One perspective is that you are a sort of an American shareholder, like you're an MLS league owner and you want to grow America. Like you're already in America, right? So your option is to make your league better to compete with the Premier League, whatever. And then now the other option is that you're Serie and you want to compete for the American market. So there's two different perspectives. So we're cross debating them a little bit.
It's a little bit apples and oranges, yeah.
Right. But that time zone piece. I love your idea of it's the American featured game of the week, and that game's late. You've lived on the West Coast. I've lived on the West Coast before. It's always been interesting, like when a West Coast team is playing Monday Night Football. Kickoff's what, at 5 p.m.? 5:05 p.m. or something like that for Monday Night Football on a West Coast game. And so you might have a local team playing their home game, or not their home game, any of their game at a really early, and especially in those like early September months where the sun is still up, like in the Seattle market, like the Seattle is playing the Giants or something on Monday Night Football. That game's kicking off at 5:05. It looks like it's afternoon out. It feels like it's afternoon out, and yet there's enough, I think, attraction there because of that feeling. And the same thing with coffee and eggs, watching your football games kick off at 10 a.m. Like I think as long as, to your point, it's close, it can work. And I think we've seen that in American sports, specifically the NFL, as those teams move around.
They could do it on Saturday too. Like my Saturday morning kind of ritual is it's early, but the 7 a.m. Premier League games start kicking off. Dude, that's 10 on the East Coast. That's not terribly early. And I think that maybe the morning time, or maybe push.
What time are those games kicking off in the UK?
Yeah, so I think England is 5 hours ahead of New York. So that's 8 ahead of me. So yeah, they're in the middle of the afternoon. It's a prime time in the UK, or maybe start at 8 or 9 on a Saturday.
And that you'd have a shot. That has a shot.
Right. They could do it. It'd be interesting to see if they care, but
we'll email into their comment box. We would like to see more aligned American time zone games.
Yeah, if you guys wouldn't mind playing at 1 in the morning for us, that would be great. We'll move on for the gram. All right, this one, I came up with this one this week. It's called Right Place, Wrong Time. So we're going to do this draft style, alternating. And the premise is we're going to pick players that played in the NBA, but born in the wrong era. So I think there's only one of two ways you could go. Someone who's a little bit ahead of their time that might have been playing, we'll go back to 60s, 70s, 80s, even 90s, even 2000s, right? That if you plug them in today, they would have a more illustrious career than they did then. And then the other way you could go is go backwards. Guys playing today, they might be a role player, maybe coming off the bench, maybe that last starter-ish area, decent career. But because of their skill set or their physical attributes, what have you, plug them back into a different area, and they're all pro. Any questions, any clarifications on that, or should we just get right into it?
I think we should say two things to listeners. One is that we decided that our criteria is cleverness, because I was like, otherwise, I'm just going to take Shaq 1955 and then Kobe 1955 and Michael Jordan 1955. And we agreed that we're going to judge this on cleverness. So I don't think I have any other questions. I just wanted to let folks know that we're not just trying to take people as far back
But
as
the
possible.
key to this is born in the wrong era. You can't take Kobe Bryant, all-time player, and say he was born in the wrong era. These are players that are defined maybe role player-ish, that born in another area that would have been all pro. That's the premise.
All right.
Kobe dominated in any area.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Okay, so draft style, I'll let losers go first. So why don't you kick us off?
I think I won the last one. I thought you took a 2-0 streak and then I won the last one.
Okay, fair. All right, let's do this.
Go ahead, loser.
I'm going to go with the number one pick. Okay, so this is as a result of just personal affinity. Watch this guy's highlight reel and your just mind is blown. The dude had an absolute time machine. I'm going to go with Pistol Pete.
Oh, he was on my list. Yeah.
Dude,
what era?
So put him in today.
Yeah,
today.
He would cook.
So he was late 70s, early 80s. And just to give you a premise, like literally YouTube, we'll drop in the show notes. His top 25 plays, this guy was doing Steph Curry meets and one mixtape in the 70s. Like literally, I'm surprised people didn't check to see if this dude was from outer space. They like literally do DNA sampling, because if you watch it, it looks like it's almost AI generated. No, people are barely switching hands, and this guy's throwing behind the back passes, crossover. Yeah, he's going fake behind the back pass, back the other way. It's absolutely insane. And like, I probably should have wrote this down because I was doing some research before, but I want to say in high school in Louisiana, he was averaging, I think, high 30s per game with no 3-point line. And I'm like, this guy was just absolutely cooking. So put him in today. And he's one of the only guys I can think of that jumps right ahead and just absolutely dominates, like literally born in the wrong era.
Yeah, I like the jumps. Yeah, the jumps ahead here more than the going back. Well done. I love that pick. He was on my board too, pretty high as well. So totally agree with you on all your points. I'm going to go with, and this feels extra wrong era, because Pistol Pete, to your point, he would have thrived in it, but he did his thing. And the person I'm going to say did their thing as well. But I feel like when they watch the game now, they must just be like, and I looked at their stats and we can pull it up, but it's just this, but I'm going to go with Reggie Miller. I just feel like Reggie Miller right now, just like he must watch the game and be like, that's exactly how I wanted to play it. And my coaches didn't understand it. My teammates didn't understand it. I could have shot from Steph Curry range easily. I just feel like he must just feel like he was such a revolutionary player and he was held back so much. And if he just could have been playing now, he would have been a Steph Curry type name. And I'm not sure I would disagree. I'm not saying I think Steph's still better than Reggie Miller, but I think Reggie would certainly be more in this sort of this top 25-ish type conversation if he could have had a Steph Curry type time arc.
Reggie made my list, so I can't be mad at that. At all. My next one is basic, but it just makes too much sense.
Basic pick for basic guy. It's all good.
Yeah, that's fine. Give it to me. Give me the label. I just refuse to believe. There's actually another one that's moving up. I refuse to believe that Wilt wouldn't dominate in.
Oh, I love Wilt.
Any air. Like, you know me. I'm a new generation Maxi. I feel like every generation that goes by, you could take a guy off the bench today and he's all pro easy. And even in the 90s, it's just, I don't even want to hear it. Wilt is probably that exception where it's, if you watch those clips, again, time machine. It's like, this looks unfair. And if you had the training we have now, nutrition information we have now, like that would just be absolutely terrifying. I can't say if he's the best big of all time, if he's Shaq-ish, is he like a Ewing? I can't say that. But talk about, I think the only thing that kind of hurts his legacy, if anything, is the fact that he played so long ago. So he's one just absolutely born in the wrong era, because you couldn't tell me this dude would be absolutely frying people.
Yeah, he might be one of the most genetically gifted human beings of all time. Dare I say, even more genetically gifted than LeBron James, because it's not crazy for me to think that he would be as muscular and as fit and as athletic as LeBron. And I believe another 5 inches or 4 inches taller than him. It was certainly a much longer wingspan. You're certainly looking at some sort of like Giannis type player, but maybe even a little bit more athletic than Giannis, which is also because Giannis is big and strong and fast, but he's CrossFit athletic, right? Like he obviously he does a lot really well, but Wilt, I don't know. I guess Giannis is probably the closest comparison I can think about, but I love the Wilt pick. Huge fan of Wilt. 100% agree with you. He would dominate in every single era. Obviously, certain situations, like maybe he should be a little bit more muscular in the 80s, a little bit better shooter in the modern era, but love the Wilt pick. It's a great one. This one. So again, I'm trying to win today, and I'm trying to win with the clever picks. And I do appreciate your basic pick, but I'm going to go with Tiny Nate Archibald. Have you watched this guy play?
I have. Yeah, I've seen it. I needed to see what the hype is about. I remember looking up his clips because I heard the name a bunch. I was like, let me just see what this guy's about.
So if you watch some of the clips, what you'll see is he has some Pistol Pete in him where he's less dribbling, more passing, a little bit more of that Magic Johnson style passing where he's going up and he sees this thing and he's like dishing off to the side, around the back, no look around the back pass. But then he has a bit of the finishing of that Kyrie English, right? Where he's coming up and he like sees a guy and he's scooping over here and he's like catching that corner and dropping it in. And he's just got a lot of these low scoop finger rolls with a lot of spin on them. And I just think that he would really fit in with sort of a Kyrie Irving type comparison. And I think to your point, like you're a big hoops fan and you're like, Tiny Nate Archibald, like I know he's certainly in the conversation of sort of these all-time greats, but to your point, like there's not that kind of notoriety around him. And I think he would have more of this Kyrie feeling. And I think with a lot of hoop heads, there's certainly a lot of controversy around Kyrie sort of off the court. But when you talk to a lot of people who really know the game, people are just like, his game is unbelievable. His shot making, his passing, like he's an excellent player that obviously has some of these other elements that get into his way. But man, his talent is off the charts. I like Tiny Nate Archibald for that same reason. His talent is absolutely off the charts. I think he would thrive with the modern dribbling and passing. If you watch his tapes, it's a beautiful game of basketball that's very difficult to pull off.
So the only thing, how tall is he? Do you know?
How tall is Tiny Nate? Let's see.
Because I'm one of those like tiny. Is he like 6 foot tiny, or is he like actually
he's
6'1"? 5'9"? Okay,
6'1".
all right, that's fair. Okay, because I was gonna say I've seen him play. If he was actually one of the really small guards, I think it would still be tough to play today. But at 6'1", 6'2", that's a fair. One
little stat here: 1972 to 1973 on the Kansas City Omaha Kings roster. I think they either were the Royals and became the Royals, something like that. He averaged 34 points a game that season. That certainly was his by far best season. He tended to average more in the mid to upper 20s prior to Boston. But it looks like a 6-time All-Star as well. I just think he would really thrive. Love his game.
Okay, I got one. I'm going for clever with pick 3.
So we're doing 5, right?
We're doing 5. I'm going for clever here. Peja Stojakovic.
Oh, love it. No, that's a great one.
Dude,
Peja's a great one.
That man was lights out, pull from anywhere, good at coming off the ball, good at creating his own shots, and just didn't get the shots that he would typically get today. Like he was playing in the early 2000s. I remember like the games were in the 80s and 90s. Like he had some solid players, especially on that Kings team. He had Weber, Bibby. You had guys that were like that the offense ran through. Peja would be absolutely lights out today. I know that's probably one of my smallest gaps, right? Going from like that mid 2000s.
I buy it though.
Today.
Reggie's close too.
Yeah, true. That's at least the 90s, but we're still talking 20 years. That's certainly enough. And the game totally moved in his direction of going to the more fast-paced run and gun type NBA style that we know today. But I would actually, that guy would be putting up some major numbers if he was playing today.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to go with my pick, which I'm excited to say.
Oh God!
I feel like I'm winning just a little bit. I feel like
I'm winning. We need to see. I think it's close. I feel like I got Pistol and Peja. Like those are solid pick on it. I'm excited.
So I'm gonna go with Sheed.
I thought about Sheed. I left him off, but I thought about it.
6'10", could shoot threes, can shoot lefty or righty. His Instagram game would be off the charts. He's built for social media, TikToks, and all this stuff. Rasheed Wallace in this modern era. Oh, dude, he would be
saying funny stuff for sure.
Yeah, he would be. He's clearly, I think, matured and focused on like coaching basketball and being in the game in a more serious way. But man, if he wanted to go in this media way where we see these podcasts and these Gilbert Arenases of the world, oh, dude. So I think his height, his length, he had defensive versatility. He had offense. He could hit mid ranges. He could post his back up to the basket. He could shoot threes. To think if he grew up in this modern era now and he had the opportunity to play and then just be able to let loose. I don't want to say Kevin Durant because Kevin could have handles. Kevin has handles that are just at a level that Rasheed's never been. But I want to say Kevin Durant-ish type player in this modern era. And he probably developed some handles if he was born a little bit later. He would have worked on that earlier. But I think Sheed would be an absolute killer.
I liked that one. I had it on there. I'll put honorable mention, so I'm not mad at the pick. I just thought there was better picks. But Sheed's solid. By the way, we have to keep the social off the court stuff out of this discussion. This is pure basketball.
I got one. I have one more. Maybe it'll be my honorable mention.
Okay.
But you go. This is your fourth one now. Go ahead.
Okay. This one might require some homework from folks, but Mahmoud Abdul Rauf.
Oh, that's a good one.
AKA Chris Jackson. This guy, if you hear the account of people who saw this guy play or played with him, they said that this man was living 20 years. He is the modern, also, actually, fun fact, also went to LSU. There's something in the water down there. But like they said, he was playing 30 years ahead. The stuff he was doing then, it totally translate. Great vision, an absolute bucket. And weirdly, because of his style, almost got a little bit like blackballed, or like people took that as
he changed his name, which is a whole.
That's a whole thing too. And yeah, and he was like a little too showy. Like that stuff is celebrated now, but this guy is super nice. We're gonna have to go to the show notes to get some highlights there. But this guy was absolutely insane, and it sucks. But yeah, that era was just not built for guards like him.
Similar to your Peja pick. This one's a close one, but I do feel like he must also feel similar to the Peja and the Reggies, but Rashard Lewis. I feel like Rashard Lewis at his height and his shooting ability, and he was a good defender, versatile defender. Man, I just wonder what his career would look like in the modern era as well. So I'm going Rashard Lewis. That is not my social media one.
I'll allow it. But dude,
if it's too soon, I can go something.
It's a little soon. Also signed like one of the biggest contracts of all time up until that point. Like Rashard Lewis was a hooper. Like he was a big time hooper. I agree. He would be slightly more looks he would have slightly more looks today. But like you signed, that was right around. I don't know if there was Max's super max back then. It was like probably on the cusp. But like he was like a max-ish player. So
that's fair. Okay, should that get DQ'd? I think that's.
I want to hear your social media pick, man. Slide that into number.
All right, let's just slide in we'll slide in the social media pick. I want to go Chocolate Thunder. Do you know who Chocolate Thunder is?
Daryl Dawk, baby.
Daryl Dawkins, baby. Yeah. Daryl Dawkins. Now, Daryl Dawkins on the court is basically like Zion, really. Oh. He's less athletic, but still, he's got some Zion-like tendencies. But he was a good player in his day. But his interviews, his hair, his drip, and I think he said he was from Planet Lovetron as well. Like, dude, this guy on a podcast with an Instagram account would have been by far one of the best to follow.
He had that funk to him for sure. Oh, right? Yeah, he was a breaking
backboards.
Cat. Yes, he was. Yeah,
dude. Like I'm looking at some of his drip photos here, like even in his old age, man, red pinstripe suit, green pinstripe suit. Oh, dude, he had at one point, looks like when he got drafted, he straightened out his hair. He had like long straight hair. Like, dude, his interviews, I love Daryl Dawkins, man. So that would be my media pick there.
I don't know how this guy would do with social media. Probably not the same as Daryl Dawkins for sure. But my fifth and last pick, I'm going to go with my guy, Roy Hibbert, dude. Roy Hibbert.
Oh, great.
Dude, Roy, okay, so check me out on Roy Hibbert. Okay, so Roy, he got labeled as a little bit stiff, which he totally was, but had decent footwork. He had a little moment there on the Pacers. But man, put that guy in maybe like the 90s big man era. Like he was skilled enough, had solid footwork. he had game. In fact, dude, I don't know if you remember the drama. Him and Paul George had some off the court
Yeah.
issues
Mm-hmm.
that resulted in some weird chemistry, and actually, like he
Yeah.
had a lot of trouble getting over that. But he had that moment where, dude, he was just hooping on guys, and still, that was still big man ish era, but not quite like the 80s, 90s. You drop that guy in there, and he's an absolute bucket just from his style of play and like his ability to alter shots. I don't know. Like, I think Roy Hibbert playing in the 80s or 90s, I could totally see that. I think that guy leads teams to championships.
Yeah, yeah, especially pre-Ewing and Morning, in that as they're starting to become a thing,
Yeah.
he certainly could have been in that mix. I don't doubt that. I want to throw one honorable mention out there if
Okay.
I did get DQ'd on that one, and I just want to say Rajon Rondo. I think actually bringing back. I'm not sure which era,
Ooh,
but I
that's a
think
good one.
Rondo, like in the 60s or something like that, this Pistol Pete era or something, this Boston series, man, like we didn't bring anyone back, which I actually think was pretty cool. But I was thinking about Rondo being brought back in time in these different eras and even 80s, 90s, Kevin Johnson comparison maybe there. I don't know. But I do feel like he would have been like that next level guy.
Yeah, I was just like start off just like spitballing and writing names down. I remember I don't have it in front of me, but maybe because I was thinking about Peja, but I also thought about Turkaloo as well.
Oh, I thought about him too. Yeah. I
Yeah.
know, dude. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I also thought about Drummond
Good one.
because he was such a big body monster getting boards. Put him in the big man era, or even I would love to see like a Drummond versus a Wilt, right? Like that would be cool to see.
I had Zach Randolph. I was thinking about
Oh,
Zebo.
interesting.
That'd be maybe in the 80s or 70s. George Gervin, 6'7", 6'10" wingspan, obviously with the Iceman with the finger rolls.
He had a
Yeah.
solid mid range too. He
Yeah,
can
he
step
did.
out a little bit. Yeah,
Another one I had Arvidas Sabonis. But I started to think
that's the one. I
Arvidas.
had him too.
Yeah, and I was like, you know what though? Really, he was the right era. The Soviet Union, had they let him play in an NBA, he would have been one of those people. So I'm also not sure he was born incorrectly. He's just brought to the NBA too late.
Yeah, totally. All right, that was. I don't know, man. That's close. We might have to
It
get
was
some
close.
second.
It was
We might
close.
have to get some second opinions on this because we need a winner.
Yeah, I think the Rashard Lewis one, unfortunately, if we don't DQ it and replace it, then I think you're right. The delta on it was he was an all-star. He started on a championship contending team. He had some big
Super paid.
contracts. Yeah, the delta there, I didn't think of the delta. I just love Rashard Lewis's game more so. If I could go and play NBA 2K and bring some of the, like, he would be someone way up on my list, but the delta there. So depending on our DQ choice, but we'd love to hear from folks. Yeah, let's have them decide because I think this one's close enough to a coin flip.
I agree. Let us know in the comments, like, subscribe, all that stuff that we're too old to say, but let us know in Discord, wherever you want. And I think I won. We'll leave it up to the community to decide. So anyway,
That
wraps
Reggie
up.
Miller pick was elite. So
You took him from my list. I think it was the only one you took from my list, which is
really,
unfortunate.
you sure about that?
Oh,
You
God,
sure
dude,
about that?
watch too much TikTok. All right, we got it. We got to end it. Episode 6 is a wrap. Thank you guys, and we will be back next week. Wag back.
Wow.